Hello YouTube. So today I'm coming to you with my take on the Natasha Denona Glam face palettes, which launched on November 5th. I picked up both the light and the dark palettes last week, so let's start off by jumping into some swatches and looks with both palettes. Okay, so today we're going to be reviewing the Natasha Denona Glam face palettes. I purchased both the light and the dark, and so I think I'm going to try to pull off 3 looks today. I think I'm going to do a look with the light palette, and then on one eye, look with the dark palette on the other eye, and I actually think I want to merge the 2 palettes for my final look. So I don't quite know what it is that I want to do, so we're just going to play around and experiment. Okay, let's get started. Let's start with the light palette. Let's see. I think I'm gonna start with the transition shade, which is more like a pinky nude, but I feel like I want to use that on my brow bone. I didn't put on any primer, so I forgot that step. Okay, just as I suspected, this was a pretty good shade for my entire lid to sort of set the imaginary primer that I applied. So we're really gonna get to see how this palette looks with no primer. So I used the transition shade to start, and then I want to use the crease shade just for that, for my crease. Okay, this is probably gonna be too light of a shade for me to use as a crease shade. If I wanted to do maybe a daytime look, I would probably sweep this over my entire lid, but I'm just gonna use this somewhat as recommended. And then I'm gonna go in with a smaller, more tapered brush for the smoke shade. And hopefully y'all can sort of see that. It leans a little cool gray on me. I can see my lighting is not the most incredible right now, but nonetheless, hopefully y'all see that. And just a little bit more into the lid space. So I am going to go with the outer corner shade on the actually center of the lid, center to the outer corner. Okay, and I also did not put on any powder on my face. I used a liquid foundation. I used a cream sort of contour, if you will, because I want to see how this cream powder, cream blush does on the cheek. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so I didn't set my foundation with any powder or anything. So this is a flaky shadow, this outer corner color. It's sort of a champagne gold color. And so there is some fallout. So, you know, you might want to either layer some setting powder under your eye to catch the fallout, or you might want to just do your foundation last. I don't like to do my foundation last. I like to have everything done because eyeshadow is actually the last thing I decide whether or not I'm going to put it on. I don't always, whenever I do a makeup look, I don't always include eyeshadow. Sometimes I feel like doing eyeshadow, sometimes I don't, and so I just have gotten in the habit of doing all of my foundation first and then my eyeshadow last. So now I'm going to go into the inner corner with the inner corner color, and I'm going to use my fingers for this, but these shades would probably work best with a glitter glue or some sort of adhesive primer. Okay, and so I don't know if you're picking up the gradient effect. So I'm gonna go back over these with a brush just to blend, and I think I'm gonna use this one. So we'll pick a little bit more of that inner corner color up and actually try to get it in the inner corner. My nails are a little long, so I can't get there, but this probably would also work well foiled. All right, so that is how the upper lid looks. We'll use a pencil brush to go under my lid with the smoke color because I feel like that's the only one that's going to show up. Okay, so in person I can see it. All right, it's really pretty, and I'm not really one for champagne gold shades, so surprisingly I like this. The outer corner shimmer shade is like a more champagne gold, whereas the inner corner shade is more champagne, you know, a true champagne shade. And I'm not really big on those shades that give off that sort of stark white contrast, but these just really dance on the lid, and I'm really loving how they're coming off. So I'm gonna go ahead and, well, we'll just go ahead and move on to the next eye. Let's go ahead and go into the dark palette on this eye. So again, no eyeshadow primer. I'll probably use eyeshadow primer when I do my final look, but no eyeshadow primer or anything on the lid. We will go into the transition shade. Oh yeah, I absolutely love a warm brown transition shade. It is my absolute favorite thing to use with any look. It doesn't matter if I'm using a green look, a blue look, one look, two look, red look, blue look. I love a warm transition shade. It just makes any eyeshadow look appear as though it's melting into my skin. And so below the transition shade, we will use the crease color, which is more of a warm red brown. So hopefully this, you can see this. And I'm just gonna go back over the top of this, above this with the transition shade. And that's where we are. So for the outer corner, I'll use another brush for the smoke shade. It's a lot. Okay, and we'll just try to blend this out. And I don't think I need to add any more onto the brush. So I lost a little bit of my transition and my crease shade, so I'm gonna go back in with that and just blend. Okay, and then we'll go back above it with the transition. All right, and so now I'll use the outer corner shade, which is a pinky brown. And these are not as flaky as the shades in the light palette, so not as much fallout. There's a fleck, but not nearly as much as what I've had to sweep away from the light palette. So let's just go in and finish this look with the inner corner. We'll try to get as close to the inner corner as possible. And then I'll just kind of clean that up with the brush. Okay, and then I will go under my eyes with the transition shade, my lower lash line. And then just to sort of deepen this lash line up, I think I'm gonna use the smoke shade, but I'm gonna use a flat brush and line below my lashes to the inner third, not all the taking it all the way in, but just to give the appearance of a lined eye. Okay, so I don't know if y'all can see the way those colors are picking up. I don't have my phone near me to do the flashlight test, but I'm hoping that this ring light is giving us enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and line both of my eyes and put some mascara on just so we can see what a completed look will do. I'm not gonna put lashes on yet. I'm gonna do a third look and then we'll do lashes with that one. So let's okay, and we'll put on a little mascara and then we'll go to the blushes. Okay, decided not to go too crazy with the mascara, one coat, because we're gonna take all of this off anyway. So let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, zoom out just a little bit and let's go ahead and do the light cheek products on the light side. So the recommendation is to apply these with a brush, a blush brush. So I'm gonna use a matte angled blush brush. We'll see. Okay, here we go. Not sure if that's really showing up, but it's very cool. Let's see what applying it with my fingers will do. And I still don't see much of anything. So for the highlighter, I need to get a brush. I think I will use a dense fan brush. Just from a lot of the reviews that I've seen, it's really an intense product, so I don't want to use a thicker brush than this. So let's see. Okay, I dumped off a lot, so I think that's really there. It's a very pale champagne, and so the blush rather, is coming across very pale and cool on camera, but in person it's not that noticeable. It just looks like a flush of color. It's not the flush of color I normally go for, so we'll just move into the dark blush. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more successful. So I'll also load this up, and this is a little bit more of a berry color, not as terracotta as I thought it would be, but this is more in the color family that I use as opposed to this cheek. I've never tried Natasha Denona's cheek products prior to this. This is my first introduction to her cheek products. Let's see how this highlighter does. Oh yeah, that's pretty. Okay, this is a little bit more warm of a golden highlight, so that's also the highlighter shade that I gravitate toward. So let's see. So this is the side with the light palette. This is the side with the dark palette. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back in for look number 3. And in look number 3, I'm actually going to do a mashup of both palettes. This time I did prime my lids, and so I am going to take the light palette. Well, actually, let's zoom in first. So first, I'm going to take the light palette and go in with the transition shade on my entire lid. Okay, and from the dark palette, I will use the transition shade. Let's see. From the dark palette, I will also use the transition shade. And because I have a couple of meetings scheduled today, this next meeting that I have coming up in less than an hour, I actually have to appear on camera. I think I'm gonna do a very basic look. So I think on my entire lid, I'm gonna go ahead and put, well, I'm scared, the smoke shade. So it's gonna be a very deep look, but I'm wearing like a light color lip. So this is also from the dark palette. Okay, just trying to make sure I have an even application of this smoke shade over the entire lid. We're gonna bring it up just above the crease. And so I'm gonna go back over with the crease shade, blend all of that together. Okay, we'll flick this out a little bit, sort of turn my eyes upward. And then I'll go under with the transition shade from the deep palette. And then just like with the last look, I am going to underline my eyes with the flat brush. As we saw, the shimmer shades in the Natasha Denona palette were a little flaky and there was a lot of fallout. And since I've already set my face in anticipation of having fallout, I just want something that the shade can adhere to. So I'm going to use the Pat McGrath Intensifies Artistry Wand on my inner corner. Stamp this primer here. And I'm actually going to use a brush with this. So I am going to use the outer corner shade, which is the Champagne Gold Shimmer shade from the Light palette. Okay, and so I'm going to go back in with that same brush that I used earlier. Probably should have applied that with my fingers first. We'll go back over that with my fingers. I just found that with shades like this, it intensifies the look, the application with the finger. And because of my nails are not letting me be great. The length of my nails, rather. So I just want to dot some of that on, and then we'll use the brush to kind of melt it. Okay, there we go. Alrighty. Okay, so for me, that's a look, right? I'm gonna go ahead and line my eyes, put on mascara and lashes, and then we'll come back and do the cheeks. So here are my final thoughts on the two palettes. So if I had to choose only one, I think I would choose the dark palette, and it's just because I find that I can still achieve a daytime look primarily with the shades that are in this palette. The shades in this palette are just more complementary to my skin. I think that many people interpreted Natasha Denona's light versus dark palette as to be something that catered to light skin versus dark skin. But I don't know that that's how she's marketing or advertising these palettes. She has used the light palette on a person of deep skin tone, and she has used the dark palette on a person of fair skin tone. So I think what she's trying to convey is that these palettes are ideal for any skin tone. Yeah, the deeper shades would probably play better on deeper skin tones, and this palette would probably, the light palette would probably play better on light skin tone. If I had to pick my holy grail palette, it would probably be a mashup of the two, right? I think for me, my motivation for buying the palette was for travel, right? I do have a number of Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes, and when I saw this, you didn't have to twist my arm to get it. You know, in my mind, I'm always traveling, even if it's just to the living room. But you know, I'm always going somewhere. I do, in fact, have some travel coming up before the end of the year, and these just look like perfect companions to be able to throw in my luggage and not have to take up much real estate. When you think about the fact of grabbing a blush and then a highlighter and then an eyeshadow palette, you've now piled up, you've now encroached upon a lot of real estate in your luggage. And you know, having a sleek palette like this, where this is essentially most of the look, it just, you know, it makes things easier. So where I also think that this is a good palette is for those people who are not familiar with Natasha Denona's brand and you're just looking for an introduction into her shades. I think that this is, comparatively speaking, an affordable introduction. If you think about the her small eyeshadow palettes, 5-pan eyeshadow palettes, they're like $24, $25-ish. If you think about her 5-pan mini eyeshadow palettes, those retail for $25 each, and her cheek duos retail for $42 each. Now granted, this is my first introduction to Natasha Denona's cheek shades. I don't own any of those, but if you add up the cost for those two products individually, it's going to come up to more than $59. And that's what these retail. And then currently they are also available at Sephora, which Sephora is running their VIB sale. They just wrapped their VIB Rouge sale. They are now at the VIB tier, and then I think the next sale is going to be the Beauty Insider. So worst case scenario, you can get these palettes for 10% off. So if you're familiar with Sephora's system, it is a tiered system. You know, Beauty Insider's 10% off is what the current sale promo is. If you're VIB, it's 15% off, and VIB Rouge 20%. So, you know, there's that. So again, my motivation for this is travel, but like I said, if I had to create my holy grail version of this, it would really be a mashup of these two palettes. I prefer the dark palette just because the cheek shade and the highlighter shade is more complementary to my skin tone, but there were some shades in the light palette that I think I would love to take with me. What I would love is to have a palette that I can do a complete look start to finish. And just like I did this look, I didn't have a brow bone shade in the dark palette, so I had to reach into the light palette. So that's one that I would want to have in my holy grail version. The other shade that I would like to take from the light palette is one of the champagne shades, the champagne shimmer shades. And you know, if you know me, I'm not really big on champagne shimmer shades. Not that it isn't a good color, just on me, I don't like eyeshadows that give off that very stark white contrast to the skin. I like for it to sort of melt into my skin a little bit more. And these champagne shades, both of the champagne shades in the light palette were beautiful at that. But if I had to choose only one, I would take the outer corner shade because it's more of a golden, it's a deeper champagne shade than the inner corner shade. And so what I would swap out of the dark palette is I would actually probably go without the crease color because I think I can achieve a complete eye look without it. I feel like the transition shade is deep enough, and if I were into mixing colors, I could probably mix the transition and the smoke shade and get something close to the crease color, albeit the crease shade is much more red than either of those two shades. The other shade, since I picked two from the light palette, the other shade that I would swap out is the outer corner shade. It's a pinky brown, and if you've watched any number of videos on my channel, you know that I am really good for a pink shade. In fact, you might think that pink eyeshadow is like the only color I wear. It is not. But like I said, if I'm traveling, I want to take a more minimalistic approach to packing my makeup. Now let's be clear, I'm not a minimalist. But a more minimalistic approach to packing my makeup because I don't want to have to labor over what color eyeshadow look am I doing. You know, a neutral is going to go with everything. A neutral is going to go with, you know, it doesn't matter. And I don't see that pink brown as being a true neutral. It's very much on trend, you know, and it's very much on trend for the holiday season. But, you know, if I was relegated to taking only one palette, those would be the shades that I would go with. So anyhow, this is the look, and I have about 20 minutes to get to where I need to be, so I'm gonna have to end this. But thank you for watching.